There's a global statistic that says 96% of CEOs want impact to be measured after learning activities, but only 27% of L&D teams are able to do it. So there's a learning model 70-20-10, which explains how humans learn, and those are the three areas. So in organisations, there's an overinvestment in formal learning. In short, if you just want your people to gain new knowledge and to enjoy the experience, then classroom learning is fine. Yeah. But if your goal is to change behaviour and change the results in the organisation, then you need to do that longer intervention that spans 100% of how people learn.
Welcome to another episode of Cambodia Workwise, and today with my special guest, Gabriel Helmy. So Gabriel, you are the CEO and founder of the Capacity Specialists. You are in the industry of people development, and I think that's what we want to talk about today. So Gabriel, for those who don't know you, could you give us a little understanding of who you are and what is it you do in Cambodia?
Sure. As you said, I'm the founder and CEO of the Capacity Specialists. I've been here since 2008, started the Capacity Specialist in 2010. We are a learning and performance consultancy. That's a bit misunderstood by the market. We're often confused as a training service provider. We do help with training, but we do a whole lot more.
What's the difference between a training provider and the work that you do with your clients?
Sometimes training can be used in several ways. So one is just to explain short-term interventions. So 1 day, 2 day, and then stop. Whereas we like to work with participants over an extended period of time, ideally 3 months, because we want to use learning in order to help drive better performance in the people and subsequently in the organisation. So there's been a shift in the development of training, and you can see it in organisations. They started out calling their learning functions a training function or a training department. And then over time it moved into L&D, which also signified a bit of a longer term view from only training to wanting to grow people. Now there's a new shift to learning and performance, where there's a growing recognition within organisations that if they are investing in their people, they want it to be for a purpose, which is to improve organisational performance. So it's making sure that learning, whatever is invested in learning, results in improvement in performance rather than just more knowledge gained.
It's something I observe a lot in Cambodia, where people will value a lot the learning experience. People are very proud to say they have a master's degree or they have a PhD. They have had that certificate from a certain trainer or class they have attended, and there's less emphasis on the long-term growth, the skills that they have, the experience that they've had that leads them to where they are today. They see just the tip of the iceberg, which is, yes, you've been sitting in a classroom learning something, but there is less reflection on what is this day that you've spent in a classroom making you able to do. What is resulting from that in terms of performance, in terms of the problems that you can solve, which is, I think, something very important. And people fail to recognize that at some point. So with these views on Cambodia and the experience that you've had in the country, so you mentioned to me, you've been here for 16 years. How do you feel companies see training and development in Cambodia? So does that change in the semantics? Is there also a change in the behavior or the way it's done?
Positively, there is more focus and continued focus on seeing it as important to grow people. which is very good to see. In my early time in Cambodia, soft skills were not considered important, but now considered as equally important as functional skills. So there is a lot of positive movement and change in the way that organisations are viewing learning and the need to grow their people. I think there are still some areas for improvement or some areas for further development, particularly if organisations want to maximise the impact they get when they invest in their people. One of the key gaps I see is that organisations still have a tendency to invest in learning as a tick-the-box type of activity, while it's something that is in the budget each year, except for maybe tough times where the budget is cut. I don't believe it's considered a strategic enabler for success yet, meaning that it's never urgent. Unless, of course, maybe there is a problem with some conflict in a team that they need to fix, then that would be urgent. But in terms of there being a belief, like there is for organisations, happy to invest in new technology because they are confident that that will help drive process improvement or better performance. Yet I don't see many. There are some organisations really investing in their people as one of the highest priorities. Yeah. So I think that is a gap because at the end of the day, it's the people in an organisation that will drive its success. So in some ways, you could say that it's very obvious, but there has not been the link where if you invest in your people in the right way, it will drive better strategic outcomes.
So it's seen in a way, there's a gap between technology investments where people are confident that if you invest in this, it will work and bring results right away. Yeah. While for people, it's more like, let's give them that break time when they will be in the classroom for a few hours and maybe something will come out of it, maybe it won't, but it's okay anyway because they don't think of doing this as something that will bring a return on investment, that will bring value to the team and the people.
Yes, and I think you have hit on the right point. They don't have the confidence that it will add value because it's considered very intangible. There's uncertainty about how to measure it, how to make sure that you can get positive results. And I think that's another gap I see in Cambodia is there's not a lot of investment in L&D teams to enable them to be able to measure the impact of learning interventions. So I have engaged with many HR teams, many L&D teams, and even CEOs over my time here. And there's not a lot of understanding in how to measure results when you invest in learning. There's a global statistic that says 96% of CEOs want impact to be measured after learning activities, but only 27% of L&D teams are able to do it. So there's a big mismatch there, and I think that's a big reason for the driver in a lack of confidence that it is a strategic enabler. So I think more upskilling opportunities for L&D teams to be capable to really understand learning in depth and how to achieve positive results and impact. That is one more gap that holds things back.
I want to understand from you how to spend on L&D. Should you spend it all on the classroom training, or are there other aspects to it that should be taken into account when you're the HR, you want to invest, or the CEO, you have plan to grow your team, you already have that mindset? Should I invest all my money into trainers to come in a classroom setting and teach to my staff, or is there a different way to do it?
I always go back to what are the results that the organisation wants. What do they want to achieve with the learning? And then that should drive how they support their people to learn. So classroom learning is classified as formal learning. Formal learning also includes learning online, reading, but that is only 10% of how people learn. Then people also learn socially. I learn from others, peer-to-peer learning, mentoring, coaching. And that is usually around 20% of how people learn. But then by far the main way people learn is by doing, by experience. And that is 70%. So there's a learning model 70-20-10 which explains how humans learn, and those are the three areas. So in organisations there's an overinvestment in formal learning. Why? I'm not sure. Maybe it just comes up from that's how you learn in school, so you continue to learn in the workplace in that way. And particularly now, how there are many other ways that you can support learning in the workplace. There's still a very heavy overinvestment in that formal classroom learning.
I think it may be because if HR is not your priority and L&D is even less your priority, but you still know you got to do it, you might as well just pay for a trainer. They come in the classroom, they do this, tick the box, it's done. You don't have to care about how to follow up on that training, how to develop people further after the training. It's kind of like you pay for it, you get it done, moving on, While if you want to set up coaching sessions, peer-to-peer learning, if you want to have that learning on the job, maybe that requires more strategic thinking, planning how to integrate that in your operations. And I can see leaders thinking how that's an extra headache for them,
True.
This is just a thought I have. Let's continue.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it is much easier, but it's also not cheap. It's actually one of the more expensive ways that people can learn is in a classroom. If you think about all the inputs all the time, it's not a cost-effective way now. And my view is if you want to focus on the 10%, it's much cheaper, much faster, much more convenient for the learner if you are able to deliver the 10% online, because it still has the same impact from a learning perspective. Back to what results the organisation wants as the first step, which drives how should they support their people to learn. It's then aligned with two models, Kirkpatrick model and the ROI model, which explains how people learn. But in short, if you just want your people to gain new knowledge and to enjoy the experience, then classroom learning is fine. But if your goal is to change behaviour and change the results in the organisation, then you need to do that longer intervention that spans 100% of how people learn. That's basically how organisations can choose how should I structure this learning intervention, is how important is it for the organisation.
I want to get back on that 70% part of the 70-20-10 model. So we said the 10% is the tip of the iceberg. It's overinvested in. People are doing that and too much of that, but it's not enough. And now I want to do it right, I want to grow my people so they can tackle new challenges, be better problem solvers. How can I do that 70% of learning on the job right? Should I promote the junior marketing executive to a senior project and they will succeed? What's the key to making it happen and happen well?
Okay. So for background, we use a methodology called the Syzygy methodology, and that was created by one of our partners. Her name is Laurie Figueiredo, and she's been a global learning strategist for many years. And her focus is on the 90%, less on the 10%. So giving you an example of how this might work, or how her methodology may work, which we use and have used in Cambodia. So say, for example, if you are trying to develop leaders, the first thing you need to understand is why. Why do you suddenly want to improve the performance of your leaders? Maybe it's because you're finding that a key KPI in the organisation is not being met, and the leaders are the key drivers for achieving that KPI. So that is the ultimate goal of the intervention, is you want to improve the level of KPI achievement. So then from there you would ask, yourself and you would work out within the organisation, what are the key actions or key behaviours that those leaders need to do every day consistently in order for them to be successful in supporting the organisation to reach the KPI. So there might be 6 to 9. So we suggest 6 to 9 is an easy number of behaviours for people to remember. And so those behaviours might be around communicating a vision with my team clearly, coaching my team, understanding my KPIs, just certain things that all leaders should do, but particularly leaders in this organisation. And so you would come up with a list of the actions. Then from there, that would drive your learning content, because the organisation wants them to do those actions consistently. Then the organisation may have to teach them how to do those actions. And that might cover confidence, that they know clearly what they have to do and that they understand the why they have buy-in. So then the formal learning would be based on making sure that the leaders know how to do these actions consistently and well. So you have the formal learning session, and then after that they then go back to the workplace and they start to use and start to do the actions. And then their line managers also have that list of the actions and the behaviours, and they monitor. Is my team member as a leader, are they doing these things consistently? They will either be doing them well or not. So if they are doing them well, then positive reinforcement. Great, I've seen you do this, keep going. And if they aren't doing it well, then it's up to the line manager to explain why, give feedback and ask them to retry, redo it. And that ends up being a cycle. And so that's the on-the-job learning and the coaching. That is the 90%. Where the learner gets the opportunity to practice what they learn in their real job, and they get feedback. And they get feedback fast, and then they can try it again in the right way. That's how we learn. But to do that requires creating a framework, which is the Syzygy framework that we use. But that's basically how you can support a learner in 100% of how they learn.
And this is applicable regardless of the seniority level of the person being trained.
And also regardless of the skills. You could use an example for customer service. What are the key daily behaviours that your customer service team should be doing when they interact with a customer? Sales, what should your salespeople be doing? What should your finance team? Yes, it will be relevant for all skills, all functions, all types of people. For the majority of organisations, I still think it's around a process whereby they approve a budget and then they go and ask individuals or teams what are your learning needs. So where they do a TNA, that's probably the more common way, because it's still aligned to a tick the box approach. They have a budget, they want to spend it, they're not sure how to do it. So the way that it's always been done is you do a TNA in the organisation. So that's one way that all organisations invest. Another way is if there is a problem that at the highest level, that would be linked to where they are not achieving a KPI and it's a new focus. This year they want to really focus on this and they understand that it's a people enablement challenge, and so they know that they need to change. And then the other might be where it's a new strategy. They want to do something new, then of course you need to make sure that your people are able to support that change. They would be the three common scenarios that we see. Probably the last two are ones where they are willing to invest to do it right. Because of course, if you want to do it right, it costs more. Because it's not going to be just a hit and run. You need to support your people more extensively to change.
There's a higher cost up front, but maybe the return on investment is also more interesting.
Yes. And I very openly tell our clients that it's not worth investing in any intervention unless you are going to get return investment, because there are many competing priorities now in what an organisation needs to invest in. And that's why it frustrates me a bit that organisations just put it as a line item, as a cost.
Right.
And so long as they keep on making money,
Yeah.
they don't mind what they spend.
Mm-hmm.
They don't mind if it's really giving them real impact or not. It's fine. It's a line item. We can cover it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not important. I see that there's a lot of wasted resources, because it's not only the money that the organisation is investing that is being wasted, it's also the time of the learner, because the learner is having to spend time in all of these formal learning sessions when maybe it's not so useful for them, but they're just being forced to. So it leads to so much waste. But I guess the waste is not a big enough pain for organisations to want to change that.
Right.
Yeah.
How do I measure the return on investment? How do I make sure that the money I've spent is coming back to me one way or another?
Yeah, okay. So we like to use two models which are very similar. One is the Kirkpatrick model and one is the ROI model. Both came out of the US years ago. But they basically say that there are 4 levels of impact when you invest in your people. The first is reaction or satisfaction. Yeah? So how do they feel after being part of the learning intervention? Have they felt that it's worthwhile? Do they think they will be able to use it? Were they engaged in the session? And you measure that by using an evaluation survey. And that's probably 99% of organisations use that as a measure. The next level is knowledge gain and skills gain. So have they gained new knowledge, new skills? Have they changed their attitude? That you measure with some kind of a testing process. If they know more, if they can do more after the learning than before the learning, then you have achieved level 2 results. Yeah? Then level 3 is a behaviour change. So after the learning intervention, have they gone back to the workplace and do they change how they work, change how they behave? And a behaviour is observable. So doing observations back in the workplace is how you measure whether you have achieved that goal or not. And then level 4 is impact and results. So as I mentioned at the beginning, you might target a KPI. So then you would see, has that KPI improved or not? If it has, then you have achieved level 4 impact. So those 4 levels are fairly common between the Kirkpatrick model and the ROI model. But the ROI model then adds a 5th level, which is return on investment.
Which is what the finance department will look at if they want to renew for another.
Yes. In simple terms, that's just what was the net gain of the intervention as compared to the cost. It's about converting that KPI achieved into a monetary value and subtracting the cost of the intervention and comparing it to the cost of the intervention, and then you come up with a return on investment. The challenging part that organisations face is, but how do I convert program to improve communication? How do I convert that into a monetary value? My view is you can still convert an intervention like that into a monetary value by understanding what is the problem the lack of communication skills is causing and following that through. And it will always be either a time cost or a resource cost. And then if you can get to that time cost or resource cost, then it's not hard to convert it into monetary value.
Time cost being the person whose time is used to solve that issue,
Yes.
how much we pay them, and then per hour. And
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
How do you choose which employee or which department to invest in when you have to create an L&D program? Because I assume, if you have 100, 1,000 employees, you cannot invest in everybody at the same time. How do you make that decision?
So I would always look at it from the organizational goal perspective, because at the end of the day, why is the organization investing in its people? Because it wants to improve its performance in some way. In my view, it needs to come from the strategy, from the highest levels in the organisation, and I go back to learning as a tool to improve performance. So where does the organisation want to improve its performance? Most organisations measure their performance through KPIs. So it's which is the KPI that is the highest priority to be achieving at the moment. And then that will drive where you create your learning program. That will also cover which function, which people, because if there's a particular function that is finding it the hardest to achieve that KPI, if there is a particular team within that function that is finding it hard, then I would focus on that.
Okay, so based on organizational objective and difficulties that you've heard from the ground level where people are having a hard time achieving this other objective, this is where you need to go.
Yes, so that it keeps focused on learning and performance. What's the purpose of learning is to improve performance rather than just being that it's to keep people happy. Or while some organisations still think like that, I think at the end of the day, if the organisation is more focused and it improves its performance, then it will have more resources to then do things to keep its people happy, if that's what it wants to do.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it's a win-win. An organisation is performing well, its people feel proud, its people feel good, its people grow faster. I'm still a firm believer that if you link learning to that, it ends up being good for all stakeholders.
So Gabriel, before we close, there's one question I'd like to ask you that I ask to all my guests, which is, what do you wish for the future of Cambodia?
Okay, it's a very interesting question. So I think given I'm in the learning space, I think it is something related to that. Cambodia is going through a lot of change because trying to improve its human capital is now one of the key goals of Cambodia, and I'm seeing a lot of positive change in that area through the education system. I would wish for Cambodia to be more bold in what it is doing in that space. I think there are many innovative learning and educational approaches around the world that have proven to be very successful. And I would like Cambodia to be seen as one of those countries that is really paving the way forward to innovate in the education and the learning space rather than just playing a catch-up to the rest of the world, because I think it has the capability, it has the people who would like to do that. So that's what I love to see.
Okay. Gabriel, thank you so much for being on the show today. That will be it for today, and thank you for your time, and to the listeners, I'll see you next episode.
Thank you.